Hypnosis and Pregnancy. I am a reflexologist specializing in pre- and post-pregnancy sessions, and part of the reason for my trip to the Omega Institute for your 2010 training was to find out more about the unborn child. One of the most fascinating topics that we discussed was how we can be regressed to being inside our mother's womb. I have done this personally, and I found it to be not only very interesting but also equally moving to actually feel the emotions of such a small person before setting foot on this earth plane. Over the past few months, since the training ended, I have seen 10 women with their babies in a breech position. All were around 35 to 38 weeks and were desperate to try anything to turn their babies. Whilst working on their feet, I talked them through a visualization that I had created to help them connect with their unborn baby. It starts by having them, in their mind, tiptoe into the uterus, where they simply talk to the babies, reassure them that all is well, and, more important, tell them that mummy loves them. The women tend to stay there for a few minutes and then I bring them back, finish the work on their feet, and awaken them if they've fallen asleep. To my amazement, all 10 babies turned, and each was birthed in the normal position. I know this is only a small section of women, but so far it has been 100% successful. The other interesting fact about this is that an overwhelming majority of the women had experienced a miscarriage before this pregnancy. If I had my spiritual hat on, I would say that the women had not fully dealt with the emotional trauma of the miscarriage, that there was still emotion locked in the body, and that, sadly, the baby was picking up on it. Susie Gower, are these wondrous events, or is it that we do not yet understand the science and physiology underlying babies turning from the breech position? I do know that mother and baby communication is profound and real, even during the prenatal period. Susie is helping to validate these multi-level in utero bonds, these tiny miracles. Even if our minds cannot fully comprehend the events described in the stories of this book, it is essential that we keep them open and inquisitive so that experience and learning can occur, as the next story demonstrates. Shifting from skepticism. In April 2011, I attended your seminar in Sydney, catching the bus from Canberra the night before. I was of two minds about attending because I had started to have doubts about whether or not any of this new age stuff was really true. I thought that I would just attend the morning session, see how it went, and then wander around Darling Harbour for the afternoon if I wasn't convinced of its worth. While I was a little skeptical initially, my main hope was that I would be able to work on reducing or eliminating my phobia about wearing tight clothing and to get rid of that claustrophobic feeling of being constricted. These feelings result in panic attacks that affect my personal life and my work. During the second exercise at the seminar, the person whom I was sitting beside took my wedding ring and had a feeling of a train struggling through a dark, smoggy, dirty city. As the train moved through a tunnel, it came out into a wonderful green landscape with beautiful views and pastures. More amazingly, she picked up on tightness around my chest and the difficulty breathing. This is exactly how I feel with my claustrophobic clothing. While I can't say that I saw a huge difference straight away, as I was wearing loose clothing, I felt extremely pleased that I hadn't left at lunchtime. I was on the bus on the way home, thinking about all of the exercises I had participated in at the seminar. That night, I had one of the best sleeps I have had for years. No waking up in the middle of the night with worries about work. No trouble falling to sleep. Chiral shifts were occurring in Cheryl's psyche. She slept better than she had in years. For the insomniacs among us, this is hugely important. To have doubts is alright, as long as the doubts do not block you from opening your mind and allowing yourself to experience. Try not to get caught up in overly cerebral arguments about what you are discovering. Don't stop reading about it, don't stop learning, and don't stop growing just because you have an intellectual objection. Perhaps there is an answer to your question, even if you have not yet uncovered it. Do not let the unexamined opinions and judgments of others influence your heartfelt actions and compassionate nature. Dr. Helen Wambach, a psychologist who was highly cynical of the idea of past lives, led a large-scale scientific investigation into the field in the 1960s. She began her series of experiments with the intention of disproving the theory of reincarnation, but her results had the opposite effect. She found that an overwhelming majority of details recalled during past life regressions were consistent with historical data and records. After publishing her findings in books such as Life Before Life and Reliving Past Lives, the former skeptic concluded, "I don't believe in reincarnation, I know it. Our past and present life ailments span an entire spectrum, ranging from mild symptoms like claustrophobia and insomnia to severe depression and thoughts of suicide." The next story illustrates a question that comes up frequently about one end of the spectrum: what are the consequences of taking your own life? Understanding suicide. In many of my lifetimes, I committed suicide, and in this lifetime, not surprisingly, as karma would have it, I lost a brother to suicide. I have also talked down a number of my friends from attempting it, well before I was a therapist, and I have worked with many suicidal clients. Greg Unterberger. Although I do talk briefly about suicide in an earlier chapter, I have excerpted this portion of one of Greg's stories because it makes several additional points. Greg took his own life in a number of his incarnations. Eventually, he recognized that it did not benefit his education here in this earth school to keep cutting classes so early. He had learned one piece of his lesson. But to truly understand and feel how his decisions affected his loved ones during those lifetimes, he had to experience it firsthand with the death of his own brother. Now he was on the receiving end of the action. His brother's untimely death was not a karmic punishment for having taken his own life in the past, and, although undoubtedly a difficult and painful event, it afforded Greg a new perspective with which to understand the impact and effects of suicide. Having learned from both sides, Greg was finally in a position to integrate his knowledge and put it to use by helping others. You can never harm the soul. Your consciousness awakens on the other side after a successful suicide, only to learn that it is intact and must return to this earth plane to face and master the very same lessons from which it had tried to escape. So that was not the solution, it realizes. I should have stayed, I should have made other choices. It will oftentimes be faced with similar circumstances as those that may have precipitated the decision in the first place, and it will need to find another way of coping without harming the physical body, that great gift which provides our souls with so many opportunities to evolve and grow. The lessons must be learned, no matter how many lifetimes are required. Greg has learned them, and he has become a lifeguard to those in despair. He has acquired a special insight and empathy to help those contemplating suicide, and they would be wise to listen to him. Some forms of suicide have less consequence than others. For a 90-year-old person with intractable, permanent, and disabling pain to end his life, or for a person afflicted with severe mental illness to do so, as it may be the illness itself that is responsible for that decision, is not the same, karmically, as it is for a 40-year-old businessman who has been embroiled in some financial scandal. Yet I have found that there is a commonality among people who take their own lives, as well as among children who die young, in that their souls are returned to earth more quickly, for there is still so much that needs to be learned. I believe that we learn up to the last moments of our physical lives. For this reason, suicide is never part of our soul's plan. Our lives always have more to teach us. As students in this earth school, some of us may be in the 1st grade, the 6th grade, or high school, but eventually, with enough education, we will all graduate and leave this school behind. And then there are other schools, higher dimensions or levels where we continue our spiritual progression. But until we all graduate, none of us does, for we are all one. We may come back voluntarily to help other people, or animals, or sentient beings to evolve. Or we may help out from the other side even if we do not incarnate in physical bodies, and there we will continue to work to assist those other souls with whom we have been connected for eons of time. Do not be concerned with how many millennia it takes you to complete your classes. If you are progressing to be a kinder, more loving, less selfish, less violent person, then you are moving in the right direction. The direction is more important than the speed. It makes no difference if this is your first lifetime or your last, or if you have many more to go. Only the end matters. Of course, the act of harming or killing the body is not limited to the self. History is filled with examples of how we have perpetrated ignorance, hatred, and violence by hurting one another. But they provide an important legacy from which to learn, and their lessons are invaluable, as the next story. Soulmate. This is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.